term hormones means drive to action. This is not a question of anatomy generally. Yes, there are innate differences, but they are differences related to how the owner of any particular brain is going to interact with the world, are treated very differently by their worlds. Hugely flexible, hugely responsive to what's going on in the outside world. And
generally a little bit underdiagnosed, but especially so in women.
Really, there has been a long-standing belief that autism is more common in males than females.
Welcome to Khan Clinics, your dedicated space for exploring the vital connections that shape your well-being. Here we dive into everything from achieving peak physical fitness by mastering sustainable weight management to optimizing your diet for a vibrant life. We're passionate about uncovering the power interplay between your mental and physical health, offering you insightful strategies to nurture both. Join us as we unlock the secrets to embark on your self-confidence and your inspiration by interviewing the top-rated personalities, not from only the US, but around the world. At Khan Clinics, our commitment is to bring you evidence-based information that inspires you to confidently control your health journey and live your life to the absolute fullness. I'm your host, Amir Khan. Let's get ready to unlock the true potential of being a human with the most amazing people around us. Other than the size that you just mentioned between the male brain and the female brain, there are differences in hormones and endocrine systems. Male and female are just genetically having different endocrines. They do have an effect on the brain, how that thinks or processes information, does it not?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, hormones, the term hormones means drive to action. And one of the genetic outcomes of being male or female is that there are average differences between males and females. We come back to that again. And the story has long been that, for example, high levels of testosterone in males explain all sorts of social and political power differences between males and females, and is often harnessed by evolutionary psychologists, for example, who believe that behavioural differences in men and women hark back to Neanderthal times, etc. So yes, there are hormonal differences, but one of the things that contemporary social neuroendocrinology has shown is that they are much more affected by external social factors than in non-human animals. And it is from the study of non-human animals that most of our understanding of hormone effects has come. So the fact that we now know that, you know, the fact that men and women are treated differently, boys and girls are treated differently, babies are treated differently even before they're born, if you're going to talk about gender reveal parties, reflects a very powerful social pressure which can interact with, you know, acknowledged hormone differences.
Thank you. So if you do emphasize that in your book that the brains are shaped more by other factors other than its inert qualities. There is no difference between the neuron between male and female, but yet.
Yes, that's right. And I'm not denying that there are biological differences in some ways, different kinds of hormone receptors, to come back to what we were talking about before. The key issue is, you know, why are we asking these questions? This is not a question of anatomy generally. It's let's have a look at gender gaps in the world. Let's have a look at who is most successful, who has most access to education, etc., etc. And so that's why we're asking the questions. And I think it's important to remember that. and to say, yes, there are innate differences, but they are differences related to how the owner of any particular brain is going to interact with the world. And if that world treats that individual differently from other individuals, and it's clear from centuries probably, but decades of proper scientific research, that males and females are treated very differently by their worlds, then we need to take that into account in trying to explain any gender gaps that we encounter.
Thank you for explaining that. Just for our audience, would you just give an overall summary between, yes, there is no difference between the brain itself, but it's the social, biological, other factors, upbringing, stereotypes, etc., that can affect the brain growth. Is that a true statement?
Yes, that's right. I mean, the early years, the brain is hugely plastic. It's hugely flexible, hugely responsive to what's going on in the outside world, and that we need to remember. I mean, one good example, is looking at a so-called robust difference between males and females, that men are better at sort of spatial thinking, they're better at logic, they're better at mathematics, they look better at science, etc. So there is a suggestion that they have a different way of thinking and that this is somehow innate. But if you actually look at the kind of factors which influence spatial success, what is happening is that boys and males, adult males, are exposed much more to spatial training opportunities. So, a boy child is much more likely to be encouraged to play with construction toys. And if you go into toy shops, maybe getting a bit better now, but certainly it was always the case that, it was the boys who played with Lego, etc. So very early differences interact with different effects in the world. And so you get a group of people who are very good at visuospatial tasks because they've been exposed to them from, a very early age, and others struggle. And in the way of human nature, you pursue the things you're good at, or you leave behind the things you find difficult.
Thank you. Thanks for explaining that. Dr. Rippon, we're going to move on to autism. And historically, it's been generally a little bit underdiagnosed, but especially so in women. How does masking play a part in the diagnosis of autism?
Well, it's a complicated story, which is what I wrote about in my recent book, Off the Spectrum, I think it's called in the States, which is really, there has been a long-standing belief that autism is more common in males and females. And as it turns out, that's become a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, so that the diagnostic tools which eventually emerged to try and impose some kind of consistency and validity in diagnosing were actually based on behavior in autistic males, so boys or adults later on who'd been diagnosed as autistic. It was their behavior on which these diagnostic schedules were modelled. And so women very often, or girls very often, didn't express their autism in the same way. And therefore they, in inverted commas, failed the autism tests. And so they weren't diagnosed as autistic. And therefore the autistic epidemiological data started to show, oh yes, it's, in some cases early on, it was like 15-1, much more common in males. And it sort of settled back into maybe 4-1. And that's still the ratio that's quoted now when people talk about autism. So there was a belief that, if a teacher was presented with two children who had exactly the same behavioural problems, if one of the children was called Jack, the teacher would be much more likely to say, this boy might be autistic and might need some special support. Whereas if the child was called Chloe, the teacher would be much more likely to say, she's a girl, she's probably socially anxious, she can't be autistic because girls don't get or aren't autistic. So it's a complicated story because it then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, in that at the end of the chain, if you look at autism research, there are fewer women available for such research because they haven't been recognised, because they haven't been diagnosed. And therefore any research into autistic brains has been mainly on males.
What a remarkable journey we've just experienced together. The path to health isn't always straight, but it's always worth the effort. I hope today's conversation inspired you to take the next step in your wellness journey, armed with new knowledge and a fresh perspective. If today's episode left you inspired, share it with people, someone who need to hear this. Give us a thumbs up and your opinion. Keep exploring, keep evolving, and we'll see you in the next episode of Khan Clinics.